Welcome to Armchair Preaching, a podcast of the First Presbyterian Church in Lakeland, Florida. This is a podcast about God's Word, the beauty of the gospel, and what it takes to communicate that truth to others. I'm your host, Pastor Zac McGowan, and on today's episode, Pastor John and I talk about some of our favorite moments from 2024, and we discuss this week's message in our series entitled, What Child Is This? We hope you enjoy the conversation. Welcome back, everybody, to Armchair Preaching. This is episode 192. Just checked on that, 192, just before we hit record. So we're barreling towards 200. We'll see. We'll see if we get to 200.
Again, when we got to, what was it, 100, we had a little celebration.
Mini celebration. But this is the last, I can confidently tell you this is going to be the last Armchair Preaching of 2024.
Right.
Because we are 1 week from today. We're recording this on Wednesday, which is the 18th, which is a day later than we typically record it. But 1 week from today is Christmas, and then 2 weeks from today is New Year's. So I can confidently tell you we're not going to have time to record next week. So this is going to be the last one for 2024.
Yeah, it's been a good year.
Yeah, and we've done this in previous years. I think we've done this maybe every year. I'm not sure if we've done this every year, but I know we did this last year. Was to talk a little bit about some favorites, and I tried to prep you for this before rather than springing it on you last minute and saying, "Hey, what were your favorite things from the whole 365 previous days?" Well, it's not quite 365 days. I mean, I guess something could surprise us in the next 2 weeks that becomes our favorite thing, but it's doubtful.
Short of that.
It's doubtful. So ask you, John, we're looking at basically two categories. What was your favorite thing kind of outside the world of ministry? And then what was your favorite thing inside the world of ministry? So that can be as broad or as narrow as you'd like it to be. But I'll ask you to kick off. What was your favorite thing in 2024 outside the ministry here at FPC? What was your favorite thing?
Well, on a very personal side, our third daughter moved to town.
Okay.
So that was a big deal. We've got that puts all 5 grandkids within 15 minutes or so of us.
Big deal.
So that's a big deal. So that was probably the highlight of the year for us on the personal side. And then just, I don't know if I could pick any number of things that was sort of highlighted events of the year. We had a lot of good things going on. Read some good books during the year. I had some, I was looking back over the year. I was like, gosh, this was the year we had the solar eclipse. That was the kind of big deal back in April. So there's just a lot of interesting things. Of course, we had 2 hurricanes here. Wouldn't count as a favorite events, but it was certainly memorable.
Monumental, if not favorite, right?
As you said in your sermon, I think this past Sunday, said getting to November 30th was a big deal.
It was,
getting past hurricane season. So those are a few of the things. It was a good year for living in Lakeland and being alive and just being around the things happening, even the crazy things that are going on with the presidential election cycle and the hurricanes and all this. You saw a lot of coming together by people, and that was fun to be a part of. How about you?
Yeah, for us, it's been a crazy year for lots and lots of different reasons. On the personal side, I can say, I got to go to a couple of concerts with my kids, which 2 with my son, 2 with my son, and one of them my daughter came. My daughter's, she did Taylor Swift last year with my wife, and they did Ed Sheeran concerts. So she's been my son had never been to a concert before, so he and I and Hanny went to, I'm of the generation that the band Weezer was a big deal. So with the 30th anniversary of the Blue album was this year, and so they did a tour with that. My kids are really into that, which is, it's funny because that's oldies to them, and I still remember it coming out when I was 14.
Feels like yesterday. Yeah.
And so going to see that with them was a lot of fun because it's just a fun show. Like, it was at the Amway Center. Well, it's not called the Amway Center, the Kia Center in Orlando, where the Magic play. And then I took my son to Miami just like 10 days later to go see a band that's very, very esoteric, very niche band called Sugaros, which is from Iceland. They're an Icelandic alternative. It's very weird. The guy, his name is Jonesy. He plays his guitar. A lot of the songs he plays his guitar with a bow.
Wow.
Like, yeah, but they did this with like a full orchestra. Like it's a rock band. Rock adjacent is more like it, but it's because it's very ambient. But like with a full orchestra, which was very cool, and it was more. It was less spectacle, like with the Weezer show. I mean, they had like rocket ships like coming down and stuff like that in the Weezer show. But like this one was more about the music and the lighting. It was much more.
Was that your band? You wanted to go to that concert? Or was that Caleb?
No, me. He had never. I told him. I said, well, this is a band that if you say you like music, like you say you're a music person, this is a band you need to know about, like you need to go see. So he was like, yeah, because like most of it's like.
And Julie had no interest in that?
She had no interest in seeing. I mean, she likes Sugar Roast because a lot of their music is very ethereal in a lot of ways. And there's a lot. I mean, I have written papers on this band before, so or written parts of papers on this band because they blend a lot of postmodern and then postmodern aesthetics. But anyway, that was a lot of fun because I'm a music guy. There's a lot of good music that came out this year, and some of my favorite bands that are kind of on the fringes had albums like Close Talker and James Blake, and these are all non-religious bands. But so if you look those up, they're like, wait a minute, these are not worship. These are not worship albums. There were great worship albums too. Phil Wickham and has had some great albums. But and then The Cure came out with a new album. The Cure from the 80s. They had a new album this year, which was very, very good. Actually, on a lot of big lists, like top 10 of the year, and surprising that the guys that are, they're up there still rocking.
That's definitely not. Now
that's that very 80s, still doing their thing. The Songs for a Lost World. It's just right down the middle for a Robert Smith pinned album, but it was good. I like that. So a lot of good stuff in the cultural world. Funny thing is, I think we talked about this last year. I've seen very few movies. Very few. I used to go to a ton of movies, and I could not remember. The only movie, and I know I've got at least to one other one, but I couldn't tell you what it was, so it couldn't have been that good.
You did Barbie when it came out. Barbie and
that was last year.
Barbie
though.
And Oppenheimer.
Yeah, that was last year. That was last year. But that's because I was like, I saw Barbie. It's like, no, that was 23. That was on 24. We did see Wicked. I saw Wicked, and that was fine. My kids loved it. My wife loved it, and I thought it was fine.
We saw Twisters. I just thought about that. So what have we seen?
I heard that was good. I didn't go see that.
It was the same as Twister. Just an updated Twister.
Yeah.
Now it's Twister.
Now it's multiple. So it's going to up the ante.
But as Twister was, it was good to see it in a theater. It was good to see the drama and all the loud, the swirling and all. It was good to have in a theater. So saw that. Forgot about Nashville, by the way. We went to Nashville for the fellowship conference. But Christina, our daughter, lives there, so we were able to visit with her. So that was a nice part of 2020 as well.
Yeah. There was some moments like that with now that my kids are older, we've gotten to do some cool things with them. We as a family, we went on a cruise to Central America, which was a ton of fun. I held a sloth, I didn't know that was on my bucket list, but it was actually really.
He added it and crossed it off all on the same trip.
Yeah, but what was cool? You're talking about personal things. Those are the kinds of things that you don't know are going to be awesome until you do it. And you're like, wow, this is actually the fact that the God of the universe thought this was a good idea is just amazing to me. I mean, it was amazing that I look at this animal that feels like it weighs nothing. I mean, it's like barely there. But it looks like it should be in a horror movie.
Yeah, but it's the claws and
the mask
hanging from the tree.
They're so docile. And then we swam in the cenotes, which is in Mexico. Which, if you've ever done that,
jumping in.
To me, I did not know that should be on my bucket list. It was on my bucket. Again, talk about putting it on and crossing it off. That was a lot of fun. So we did that too, and then I guess we saw the Grand Canyon this year too, which is a little thing.
You have done a lot.
We have done a lot this year.
And you had your fall vacation to the mountains.
The mountains, which is Gatlinburg. Yeah, we went to Zion National Park and Grand Canyon earlier in 24, and that was, I've talked about this before. For us, travel is a big deal because we want our children to see, because to me, I got to travel a lot as a kid, military families, you did. Julie got to travel a lot. Her dad made that a priority. For us, there is a sense of the bigness of the world to give that to your children.
Yeah.
We see a lot of, and you see this too, I know a lot of families where that's not the case, and their perspective is very small.
Yeah.
And I find as perspective goes, so goes empathy and compassion. I mean, that's just
good point.
That's been my experience. So I think it's good we got to do this. So really, the highlights there too. A lot of highlights there too, and 2 hurricanes, which were not highlights. Yeah. What about inside the church? What about ministry highlights for you? What were some of the big ones?
I realized that some of the things that have been, I think, have been useful, have been and interesting and important, have been really quiet things. A lot of behind the scenes type of work. We did a lot of work with a group that really hasn't even gone very public with its work yet. With the Legacy Committee, a lot of sort of ground laying work to figure out how we're going to do this. So that's been really. Sometimes you're working on some things. That when it's the difference between realizing potential energies.
Yeah.
When you've got something that you feel like has a lot of potential outcomes on this, and you're working on it, because man, this is gonna be. It's going to be important if we get this going. So there's that kind of thing. We did do the software switch over. That was a big thing.
Again, I would say that's one of those behind the scenes,
quiet.
But I will say, I think the front side of it is, again, that's one of those, you plant a seed, it's going to change our world. And I think when I talked to different groups about it, I was like, that's going to change the office side dramatically. Which will ultimately change the front-facing side.
And they give the congregation some tools that they didn't have prior. And we're still not done unfolding all that. But I think in terms of a highlight, maybe something more visible, something more enjoyable. Bringing Andrea on, Elena retired and Andrea came on, and there was a transition with Jerry in between. That was a big transition as well. It's been wonderful having her as part of our staff. But I think some of the things that stand out, though, are there's some baptisms. And we talked about this recently. About some baptisms came up. Big. And there were some, Lloyd Siegendorf's baptism. He's a 73-year-old man who had converted from Judaism to Christianity.
Wow.
And he comes up before the classic service and kneels down at 73 years old and receives the waters of baptism over him. And the congregation still, I heard someone 2 weeks ago just talking about that was probably one of the most meaningful things that they've ever seen. That was really cool to see that. And then
he was on the front steps yesterday helping out with our praying pruners, I think is what they're called. The guard folks. He was out there too, so he's been jumping.
He's very plugged in. Yeah. He's very excited about being here, and that was neat. And then little Conrad Cribbs, who at how old was he?
2? Probably just at 2.
Yeah, right around
months,
2.
2 years.
Yeah, somewhere a little under 2, maybe 20 months. So, anyways, enough to hold his parents' hands walking down the aisle. And on the Kirking of the Tartan Sunday, comes walking down the aisle wearing a kilt to be baptized. Yeah. And I mean, it's one of those things where baptism, you want to focus on the fact that God is doing something incredibly significant and meaningful in that moment, in all of our moments there. But you can't help but to look at this little kid and think, that is the cutest thing I've ever seen in the world. So that was really special. And the one recently with the father and twin children, those are another standout moments there. So some baptism moments were standout moments.
Well, it's funny that you brought that up, because we didn't talk about what we were going to say. So kind of going along with that, this is the first full year that I've led the parents group here at FPC. So we started off with 8 people in a very hot, sweaty room in 204 upstairs, and we started this school year in September with 35. So it's grown exponentially, and to see a lot of those families kind of rally in. You talked about Andrea and her husband Kyle are a big part of that group. The Cribbs, Caroline, and Cody are a big part of that group. But there have been baptisms that have come out of that. I think I was thinking of Kyle Merritt and who's his. This was the year, and I don't know that I've never seen this, at least this many. And you talked about the father and the twins from this past week, where I've seen parents and their children be baptized at the same time.
Parents, a mother and daughter joining the church, and a father and son joining the church. We've seen a lot of parent-child special moments.
Yeah, so I had Kyle and then Peyton, Nolan, all baptized in the same day. Then just a few weeks later, I had Heather Luce and Elby. They were baptized. I mean, this mother and daughter. And I've got one this Sunday where I've got the Hunts, Kristen and Robert. I mean, the mother and son.
Yeah.
And then
And 29th.
And then the 29th in Classic, we've got another couple. So we have more baptisms this year and more. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago, just in staff meeting. More believer baptisms or credo baptisms than I've seen in any Presbyterian church, much less ours. We've done a few. We usually do 1 or 2 a year. If we do more than 2, it's a banner year. I think I don't know how many we've done this year off the top of my head, but at least I've done at least 6, and I think you've probably done at least probably that many. I'm just talking about believer baptisms at that point. I'm not talking about the infant baptisms or the children baptisms. So anytime you can do that, because of this, when we call it a sacrament for a reason, but then not just that, but so many of these families they're in community already. They're already, you talked about Lloyd, already involved, membership. Yeah. It's when you see that process working itself out, God working itself, but God working it out in such a way in the lives of the family, like the Cribbs family, where they show up on a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
They show up to a 10-minute party. We invite them to a parent group. They get plugged in. They want to become members. They want to be baptized. They want to get involved. They're at family movie nights last night. They're at chili cook-offs, and so that's the kind of thing you want to see, right?
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing that
the Crumb family is another
Crumb
one.
family
Getting plugged in everywhere.
Yeah. So when you see that, you're like, well, something's clicking, right? God is doing something in such a way where it's clicking, and it's not just clicking on a mass level where you start to see numbers, but what the numbers indicate are people, and seeing those families. So watching that and seeing that across the board.
Maybe that's another highlight of the year, is just to say that there's there's been challenges throughout the year. There are always challenges in the church, but to see in the middle of all these things that are churning the activities of the church, something intangible begins to be noticed.
Yeah,
that's what's happening. It's something intangible is beginning to be noticed, and that is that there's something happening here.
Yeah,
that's the best way I've said it before. Yeah. There's something happening here. It is the parents group, and it is the things like that are happening in the classic service. The way that Sam is with the choir, the way Jennifer is with the band, the way the Anna is with the children, and just everything is. Not everything's clicking. If it's an 8-cylinder car, it's we might have been working on 6 cylinders before, 5 cylinders before, but now we got about seven of those cylinders are firing pretty well. In fact, the car's running pretty well, and you can sense it. And
you talk about that too. One other highlight, I think, to me was probably the Special Needs Inclusion Sunday in September. I mean, and when even back up, I want to back up even a little bit. To the worship night that was put on, and it was totally Jennifer, but we had all. I mean, really, and one of the things to say too with Sam is and Jennifer is like that was a more of a modern worship night, but how many of the choir members were there just to be there, and then you had all of Shine On, which is our adults with special needs there. I mean, and you had. 200 people from across the congregation, youth, children, parents, special needs, choir members.
Yeah.
That was a real highlight for me. And then it goes into something like Special Needs Inclusion Sunday, and there was a lot, and then even like the chili cook-off where you start to see the camaraderie.
Chili cook-off was a great one. Oh wait a minute, the recent one, the ending of the Glory Christmas concert with "Let There Be Peace on Earth" with little Elizabeth Neslin up there singing the solo. Choir gets behind them, and here's the Shine On folks leading in the signing of that "Let There Be Peace on Earth and Let It Begin with Me."
Yeah,
golly, was that a good moment?
Yeah, it's great. That
was a moment.
Great moment.
So many more.
And
we didn't even get to favorite things that you learned and read.
No.
We'll save that for another one.
Yeah. Well, we'll take a short break. We'll get back and we'll talk about this week in our series on What Child Is This? We'll be back in just a moment. And we're back this week. This is week number 3 in the What Child Is This series. And, we started off week 1 with God as the center of, the God's redemptive purposes find their centerpiece in this child in the manger. Then we move into a fairly heady, which of this week is kind of the other side of that, concept of the divinity of Jesus, and this week the humanity of Jesus. So both sides of the hypostatic union, the hypostasis, which neither one of us use that term. No. In my notes, both weeks didn't use it either time.
We used what the term means.
Yes.
A ton. But we didn't use the term.
A ton. You talked about Chalcedon quite a bit this time around. I did talk about a Gnostic gospel this time around.
Yeah, gospel infancy of Jesus.
Yeah, which you didn't use the term Gnostic there, so this did you feel like this is how I felt? But I'm wondering how you felt about it. To me, this felt like a part 2 of last week.
Yes,
right. So the first week is a big overview. These two weeks 2 and 3 are two sides of the same coin in the incarnation. Yeah, and then this week coming up is again, it's more of a overview,
big picture,
back, kind of back up. It's almost like you're pulling the focus in, pulling the focus out, pulling the focus in, pulling the focus out. So, was that how you kind of had that same viewpoint?
Yeah, and I said it out loud, and I did feel this the entire time. I felt like the heavy lifting was last or the week before. Yeah, when you're saying that this child was God, that's the part that most people I feel like struggle with. Again, I clarified this. I think you said this is 2 weeks ago, but that in our modern day, I don't think we struggle as much with the humanity of Jesus because we have a lot of cultural tools to help us remember the humanity of Jesus. Yeah. But in the early church, we didn't. So I felt like it was easier for us to grasp the humanity of Jesus and harder for us to grasp the divinity of Jesus. So this really did feel like, but you have to say both of them, and maybe that's. You and I haven't studied the Christological councils enough to know that this was a huge declaration, and a lot of things had to be declared to be not right, sorry to say kosher, but not.
It's a different religion. It's a different religion.
Yeah, not orthodoxy. Yeah. Certainly, it's basically heretical. Yeah. To be able to say this is how we carefully understand this teaching here. So, I thought it was a necessary part 2 of the hypostatic union, the understanding of who this Jesus is. Yeah, and
I find I think there's a personality thing in it, because it is funny, because I agree with you. I think the humanity of Jesus is I think in our very syncretistic sort of society, it's easy to put Jesus, and I've heard people do this, alongside other religious teachers of other major religions. They put them, Jesus, Muhammad, the Buddha, and they all line them up, and they're like, well, okay, but there's a whole nother thing. Like none of those other guys claim divinity. Jesus claimed divinity, and that's a different deal. So there is something in our societal kind of mindset where the divinity part is the tripping part, and folks like C.S. Lewis and Josh Carpenter and have addressed that. So you can't do that with Jesus.
He either is or he isn't.
Either is God or he's not. He can't be a great moral teacher without being God, because if he's not God, then he's a liar or a lunatic.
Certainly not worth being worshiping. Not worth worshiping.
But it's interesting when you look back at the church councils, especially, and then you look at some of the heresies. The humanity of Jesus was harder to wrap their brains around. It's like the docetic movement, which I talked about last week. I don't know if I said it this week. It's in my notes. I'm actually
you did.
I'm actually looking at the word docetic in my notes from this past week, but I did not say it. But I did say it last week. But we mentioned on the podcast the gospel of the infancy of Jesus. I mentioned it in a sermon, which shows kind of the difficulty.
I'm glad you had the quote, by the way, that Jesus, the newborn infant, said to Mary. That was great.
Yeah. And I had to really be careful. I was hesitating on using that in the sermon, like quoting it and like putting it on the screen.
Funny. Like, this is not scripture.
Because you know how people are. You know how congregations are.
They're teaching.
They tune in and they tune out, kind of. They half tune in, like, wait, I didn't know that was in the Bible. It's not in the Bible, right? But it's funny that in the early church movement, in the first, I'd say 500 years, they really did. They had struggles with both sides, but it seems like the weight was on the struggle of the humanity of Jesus, because, as you mentioned, there are no other world religions, and there are definitely no other ancient religions where that happens, where God becomes man. Yeah, they have interactions with man. I loved how you pulled out some of the Greek, kind of the Greek things, but it's not there. So when you're trying to make that jump, understanding that the humanity side is not necessarily what our society or our culture has, although I think some people do. It's the divinity side. How are you thinking about making that handshake between those two being equally true and important?
That is the challenge. The question was how can I communicate the fully God, fully human concept, and have both of them be equally true. Yeah. Because I mean, how many times have you heard this? We talked about it in seminary. We talked about it all the time. Is that like, how is he fully God and how is he fully human? How does he, like, down the middle? He's fully God when he's awake, but when he's sleeping, he's fully human. How does that? There's a lot of, which is a very Western thing to do. Is like, how does that function? How does that functionally work?
Eastern Christians don't nearly have the same problems.
They're
with
more
this.
like, what does this mean?
Yeah,
their questions.
They don't have a problem with the how
than they are about explanation.
Yeah.
So there was that. I'd be curious to hear if you had this same struggle. The question was, why was the humanity of Jesus an essential part of the redemptive work of God? Yeah. And obviously the book of Hebrews pokes at that from multiple angles, but it's not really explicitly clear. And part of the job that I felt on Sunday was to say, this couldn't happen unless there was a sacrifice. And so the sacrifice, in order for there to be a sacrifice, there had to be incarnation. So
an actual death.
There actually had to be something in place there. And that's the one, I'll go ahead and say this, that if I would have had, been teaching a class on that, we would have hit the pause button and we would have backed up and we would have talked about, why is a sacrifice necessary?
Yeah, the Levitical system.
The whole system needed to be unpacked at that point. So this is one of those unfortunate parts where you just say, congregation, I'm going to assume most of you know that there was such a thing as a sacrificial system, and it was God's accommodation for human sin to allow people to not feel wring their hands with worry about whether or not they're okay. But I can't explain all that, so I'm just going to assume that you know that and just say, now, in order for that to happen with Jesus, there had to be an increase. So I was feeling, in my preparation for it, I was feeling the pressure to be able to explain clearly and succinctly why the incarnation, the humanity part, was necessary for the God-man to do his work.
Yeah, so I felt a very similar kind of push-pull, and I had a whole paragraph that kind of addressed what I feel like is the elephant in the room for people who are, I don't say people who, I think a lot of people, no matter, I think it's very rare you find a person with the biblical understanding where they just automatically can jump to, I understand why the incarnation mattered, right? Like, because I feel like, and I've heard this from people, well, couldn't God just change the rules, right? Couldn't Jesus just have been God and come in, right, and just done that? And I had a whole paragraph that kind of addressed that question. Yeah. But then in the answer to that question, it goes back to what you're saying. You got to pull in Leviticus. You got to pull in, Paul talks about the actual bodily resurrection of Jesus to the Corinthian church, where there was a denial of the physical bodily resurrection. Well, the physical bodily resurrection, it implies a physical bodily death, and in order for there to be a physical bodily death, there has to be a physical body. All these kind of syllogisms
you got to back out of the
man, and a 28-minute sermon becomes a 56-minute sermon,
Yeah.
and half of it, people's eyes glaze over, right? So,
well, let me ask you that: was that also something in the last 2 weeks that you have been concerned about?
oh, very concerned about it.
You've done a good bit of storytelling. You did more than storytelling than I did storytelling, which I wish I would have done more storytelling. But when you do a lot of explaining in a sermon, you also do a lot of explaining. You have a lot of eyes that can glaze over. So how do you keep it interesting?
Well, and what I did with that was to just do the work of so one of the things that I felt like we had as an advantage, and this is why I always encourage people we record the sermons so that if you miss a week, you can go back and get it, right? The series matter. So we talk about this as being part 2 of this hypostatic union Christology, but really it's an outgrowth of what we talked about in week 1, which is the sin salvation piece. So wages of sin. So I go in and talk about the wages. I took like 30 seconds to talk about the wages of sin is death. The only way you can pay for that is if there's an actual death that occurs. So that was the totality, and built into that one sentence is everything you just talked about with the Levitical system and all this. And Hebrews spends 3 or 4 chapters talking about the necessity of Jesus' sacrifice.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of
so it could have been a Bible study on the book of Hebrews at the same time, which alludes to the Levitical system.
And where I landed with it was to say what is lost from the redemptive story. What is lost? Go back to kind of the Westminster Shorter Catechism. What's the chief end of man? Is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. Well, John Piper, the Reformed Baptist, says, well, if that's our chief purpose, to glorify God and enjoy Him forever, that's also God's chief purpose. Everything that God does, He does in order to maximize His glory. So, which, again, there's a whole metaphysical kind of philosophy around that. People get kind of angsty about that, but I tend to agree with it. So what's lost in our understanding of the goodness of God if you take away the actual incarnation of Jesus?
Yeah, I think we answered that question at the end.
And I think that's what we were really. That's where both of us really kind of landed is what is gained because Jesus is man, right?
Yeah, it's amazing that we had the almost identical language for your first point, my second point were
almost the same,
the exact same point.
Empathy and understanding. And did you feel though that? And I went back and forth, and ultimately we landed in the same place. But I wonder, did you feel like that was saying enough, or did you feel like there needed to be more to that? Because I had there was a weight in me that says that's true, but it can feel awfully sentimental, right? And that's not what it is.
You know what? I kept waiting for you to talk about, because you said the words "He gets us" at least twice. You might have said it a third time. He gets us, and I said, "Is he going to do it? Is he going to do it?"
The commercials,
because there's a commercial
series.
There's a whole. I don't know who that organization is, but there's an organization
the guy that owns Home Goods, or the guy that owns Hobby Lobby. Okay. Yeah, the guy that owns Hobby Lobby.
Whole thing called "He Gets Us."
Yeah, I did think of it. I did not. I wasn't going to put it in there because I'm like I'm good with about 3/4 of those. I'm not good with. Yeah, there's all of them. Some of them I'm like, okay, you really need about 3 more minutes to explain what you're talking about in that 30-second commercial. But anyway,
but the point is that he gets us is the point. But it can be, like you said, it could be sentimental.
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 I struggled with that a little bit. I didn't want it to land. I struggle with the idea that this is purely emotionalism, and that I felt like there's a temptation in these kinds of things when you are talking about these big weighty things, because you're doing it in 25 to 30 minutes, and you're not getting a part 4 and a 5 and a 6 and a 7 on this one topic. In order to give it some, point
of connection,
home ability, that there's you're either leaning into the emotionalism, the volitional, so anyway, that did you feel any of that struggle?
The one thing that, and this is something I've thought for a long time, that I can easily and with no apology whatsoever say, God accepts us as we are, not as we should be, not as we think we should be, not as someone else thinks that we should be. That God would accept us as we are right now. The same tension I feel when saying those words is what I felt at the end of the message, and that is like, that's all true.
Yeah.
But there's one more thing to be said to it, and that one more thing to be said is that, but he doesn't leave you there.
Yeah, he doesn't leave you there.
Yeah, he may love us, and he's for us and not against us, but he also is going to poke us and provoke us and challenge us.
The discipline side of things.
Yeah, he's going to urge us. So, but sometimes you need to. Sometimes it was okay. I mean, yours and mine. I thought it was okay. That sometimes we just.
Sometimes you got to leave it there for that day.
It's okay for you to know that God loves you as you are.
Yeah, and our prayer, and my prayer at least, is that that's not the period at the end of the sentence for people. Like it becomes a semicolon or a comma to say, okay, now what? Right? Then they'll, and this is why we had the altar piece at the end with that. I felt we needed it last week, but then, or I felt like I was going to do it last week, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to leave it for this week because again, these are, and I felt like again, you have to have last week. In both of our cases, you have to have last week in order to not feel the sentimentality of this week. If you just get this week,
I think that's why I was okay with it. In the end, is because we had a heady piece last week and we had a heady piece this week in the book of Hebrews, and then we can land with that with a now the head and the heart are actually connected. You can have all this thought now, but it is affective as well.
It's a lot, and the Hebrews writer obviously took a lot of time with it because they spend a good chunk of Hebrews chapter 2, 3, and 4 really talking about the importance of incarnation related to priesthood, related to sacrificial system, somewhat related to tabernacle later on. I mean, so the Hebrews writer felt that burden too, because I think, and neither one of us really brought this up. I would say, really, neither one of us brought this up. The idea that that man would be God was absolutely blasphemy for the people and for the Jewish people too. So the Hebrews writer has that heavy lift, because he's having to say Jesus is God, and that's not blasphemy. Jesus is a human and God, and that's not blasphemy. And so that's why he's been.
There's a couple of things that hang off of just the last 2 weeks that I think would be interesting to do in some setting somewhere. One of them is a study through the book of Hebrews, doing a Bible study, straight up Bible study through the book of Hebrews. That'd be worthwhile, because if you're going to do the Hebrews, as we've been saying, you're going to go back to the Old Testament systems of laws and sacrifices. A lot. So there's that. But the other would be the Christological councils. How did they land in the language? Because Trinitarian language is what we believe. We have a doctrine of the Trinity, but the word Trinity is not in the Bible. And so it would be, and yet to get there, it took all this wrestling through. I think I mentioned last time, I counted up the 28 major heresies of the first 5 centuries of the church. That's 25 major heresies. That's a lot. That's a lot of plunging through and purging through these what they're saying, what you're saying, and then constantly going back to the source documents. Constantly going back to the scriptures.
And all of I would dare to say, and I don't have all of them in front. I would dare to say that of those 28 major heresies, they all had to do with either the Christological hypostatic union piece, the hypostasis, or the relationship of the Trinitarian persons. I mean, they almost, I think, I would say almost all of them.
Identity, character, nature of God. And
how Jesus and the Holy Spirit all are
trying to sweep through some of them.
All the ones I can think of have to do with one of those two things. And I know all the major creeds, like Nicaea especially, is talking about the eternal begottenness of the Son and the Spirit, and Chalcedon, as you mentioned, was talking about the dual nature and single personality of Christ. So, but I think people have got to understand. I mean, those are understandable points of contention, trip up points, because again, and I said this last week, we have the advantage of the Scripture, the totality of the Scripture, like the identified canon. The early church for the first 360 something years didn't have that. I mean, they had bits and pieces of it.
Yeah, it was circulating.
Yeah, but then like a thing like the gospel of the infancy of Jesus starts circulating, and who knows how old that is? I mean, if you're sitting there in Corinth or you're sitting there in Ephesus, and this gospel of Thomas or gospel of Mary or whatever shows up, well, how do you know? I mean, you don't have there's no seminaries to check it
in a book yet.
There's nobody cross-checking it. So the confusion points would have been very for the common church would have been very.
The development of the canon would be another really interesting conversation. I guess we're wanting to open up a seminary here.
The church history.
First Presbyterian Church Seminary. Open for business.
Yeah. So we're going to take a short break, and then we'll get back with. We'll do a little bit of an abbreviated portion of the devotional and small group time, just to kind of unpack some of these weighty issues. But we'll be back in just a moment. And we're back for the final portion of our episode. Not as many groups happening right now.
Everybody's kind of taking a break for holidays.
Yeah, as we said, it's a week from today is Christmas, so 2 weeks after that's New Year's. Some groups might still be going on, or they might be having parties or something where they want to unpack Christological.
Yeah, so if you had a party, in between the entree and the desserts, please talk about the Christological controversies.
That's right. That sounds like a fun evening right there. For some of us, that would be a fun evening. The funny thing is
that if you and I were having a dinner party, that would be a fun thing to do.
And throw Paul in the mix, and we'll
have the languages behind it as well.
Yeah, but we do want to, we do know a lot of people use this devotionally, and so this is a time of Advent. A lot of people pick up the devotional practice at Advent. So, what would you want people to really dig into this week if they're talking about the humanity of Jesus? What is it that you would really want them to kind of dig into this week?
I think I would encourage people to several things. One is to the very thing that we try not to do ever. I would encourage people to do, which is to go find proof texts.
Yeah, proof texts.
Proof text this.
Yeah.
Use the scriptures to validate the claim that the incarnation of Jesus, the infleshing of God, was a necessity for redemption. Mm-hmm. Find some places in the scripture, and hint, go to the book of Hebrews.
Yeah,
you'll find a lot of material there. Yeah. But I think it'd be a worthwhile exercise to. This will challenge people in their biblical knowledge. Be a worthwhile exercise to dig into the scriptures and find those places that validates the claim.
Yeah, and if people are looking for ways to do that, I mean, you can, if you've got a Bible with a concordance or something in the back, you can look for that. Just as a resource tool, one of the resource people ask me, because you don't want to Google that necessarily, because you're going to get heresies.
All the 28 heresies are still alive. So
and there are some modern versions of that. But if you're going to go and do some theological study from roughly our traditional mindset, there's a website that I've used called Monergism, Monergism.com, Monergism, and it's from a Reformed perspective, and it gathers online articles, it gathers podcast episodes.
And
you actually have a direct.
Isn't gotquestions.com or .org or something?
Yeah, .org.
Isn't that also coming from Reformed?
That's a good. I don't know that actually.
But it's a lot of. God questions is pretty straightforward. You got a question, you type it in, and I think it comes at it from a, if not Reformed, certainly more Orthodox.
Yeah. But if you go to either one of those, you can type in your different questions. If you go to Monergism, you can search the directory of theology. You can go by scripture text. You can go by topic, and so those are good places to go. And if you want to, you talk about rabbit holes. You can go down some
be forewarned.
Pretty deep rabbit holes. But if that's if you've got time on your hands, this Advent. See if you got a Christmas break and you're wanting to really dig into. I do think that's a very, and you can go both sides, divinity of Christ and how those things, and humanity of Christ and how those things interplay and how they interact, and why both of them being important are true. So definitely.
Maybe that, and to pick up with your last comment, is I think that would be the other one that I would say is like, why does it matter?
Yeah.
Why, having done that proof texting and looked for those passages that speak to the necessity of the humanity of Jesus, why does that matter to us living our lives now?
And I would, and to get there, I think about we both use the phrase, the term empathy quite a bit in both messages. I would ask people to think about moments when they have experienced the empathy of others significantly. Whether it's been in a season of grief or a season of joy. I mean, you can have empathy on the other side of it. But think about times where you have shared in some season of life with somebody else that you felt like they got it. What does that connection feel like? What does that look like? And then say, well, apply that to your relationship to Christ. Because again, while I think people do have a difficulty thinking of the divinity of Jesus, they don't have a difficulty thinking of Jesus being so far over them as to be disconnected. And that's really the opposite of what the incarnation teaches us. And so
that's a good point.
And it's one of the reasons that the Father-Son image is used to talk about the Trinitarian relationship, and why God chooses to use that terminology for us to engage with God the Father, because there is that intimacy that's supposed to be there, and there is that character of being that's supposed to be there. So I would encourage people to think about empathy in their human relationships and how that feels, how that experience molds them and binds them together, and what does that mean for their relationship to Jesus Christ?
So he's good.
Yeah. I think if there's anything else I would really dig into is, again, I think this ponies off a little bit of what we talked about last week, but where is the difficulty for an individual thinking through this union of Christ, the divinity and the humanity of Christ? Is there a difficulty point in meshing those things together in their brains? And does this conversation about the humanity of Christ, we talked about it last week, the divinity, but does this complicate that or make it easier? And why? Why is that the case?
Well, that's because there's a. If the fact that it took several, over 100 years, 200 years or so to work out this language, took really the first 5 centuries to work out this language, says that there's a lot of intellectual rigor, that's and stress that needs to go through, and so that I think that's a great question. Is like where's the rubbing points? How much of this is really the Western mind struggling with the issues at hand, because we always want to ask how exactly does this work, because we have no point. We while we have cultural understanding of this, we still have no point of reference for this, because it's too singular, it's too unique. There's no other example of this, so we just have to understand what it was, the incarnation was, and live with that,
and accept the mystery of it, right? Accept the mystery of it.
And so there's this tension between that acceptance and this intellectual hunger to know things. Those are good questions to wrestle with.
Last thing I would ask is, so we've done 3 weeks. We've got another sermon on Sunday that's in the Advent calendar. We've got Christmas Eve, which tends to be a briefer message, a little bit more of a Christmas. I mean, we're talking Christmas focused, obviously, on Christmas Eve. But if you are advising, it's 1 week from today. Christmas is 1 week from today. If you're in the pocket of somebody like following them along, and they're like, hey, I really want to experience the full weight of this next week. School's about to let out for kids and teachers and things like that. What are you advising them to do over the next 5 to 7 days to get the final push of readiness for the celebration of the birth of Jesus? What are the practices or the techniques? Is there one thing that you would say, prioritize this if you prioritize nothing else?
My first reaction to that is to carve out in a season of life where it's difficult to do this, carve out some space in your days to be able to go to the stories and read the stories devotionally. Read them slowly, and you read if you have a Bible that has the references. So when there's a reference to a prophecy previously, go back and read the prophecy as well. But at a minimum, read through the Gospel of Matthew, read through the Gospel of Luke. If you want to have a different take at it, read through the Gospel of John. But I would read through those opening chapters of Matthew and Luke in particular, and just. This is about the story of Christ, but just slow it down, read devotionally. Yeah. That's my first thought. How about you?
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I think so we've got 6 worship opportunities in the next week. We've got 3 on Sunday. We got 3 on Christmas Eve. Make 2 of those a priority. Make 2 of those a priority. Make 1 on Sunday. Make 1 on Tuesday, next Tuesday, Christmas Eve. Make those a priority. Talk about the slowing down, and really sit in the story itself, and really sit in the passages of Scripture and the songs. So the songs communicate so much value in. The last couple of weeks you've quoted some of the Christmas and Advent.
I sang them. We sang them in the live services. We had everybody sing them at the 10:30 service.
So I would encourage people to take that time, in addition to what you're talking about devotionally. That would be an individual preparation. I would say be a part of the corporate preparation as well too. And then the other thing along with that is understand that Christmas is not one day. If we have a season of Christmas, it's 12 days. There is a reason it's 12 days. Please don't take your Christmas decorations down the day after Christmas. Sit in the incarnation for 12 days. That's why we have 12 days of Christmas. Yeah. It's not just for fun and games. It's so we can sit in this pivotal moment in human history. We can sit in it for a little while, even if it's just for a few days. Keep those visual reminders up that we've been prepping for Christ to come. He is now come. So let's sit in that and enjoy that and feel the profundity of that for a little bit. So,
I love it.
Anyway, that's it. If you missed any one of the messages in this series, encourage you to head to our website, fpclakeland.org. Go to the worship page and the sermon archive tab where you can see complete services, classic and Vine, or go to the Church Center app. And if you have not connected with us on the Church Center app, download the Church Center app. You can just search for that wherever you get your apps, and then search for FPC Lakeland. Here, you got to do the whole First Presbyterian Church, Lakeland, Florida. Then you'll find us.
It'll ask for your phone number. You put your phone number in because we've got it in our system. It'll recognize it, and then once you do that, you're in.
And then right there on the first page is the sermons. And if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you hit the subscribe button. And you can also watch the complete services there whenever they drop. If they're live, you can also watch Glory of Christmas concert. You can watch a lot of other concerts and different things. So make sure you hit the subscribe button and hit the bell icon, the notifications icon, so you can be notified when a new episode drops. Pastor John, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you. Happy New Year.
Happy
New Year to you. Merry Christmas. See you all in
2025.
Well,
no,
see you on Sunday and one of those 2 services.
One of those services, we definitely
2 services.
One of those
2 days.
Yeah, with the lot.
6
I'm
services.
sorry. I preached 2 sermons already today. So I'm already 3 weeks from now in 29 and 5, and I still got 2 more to write this week. So my brain is a little bit scrambled with all of them.
The good thing is you're going to go into the holidays with that done.
Yes, absolutely. Pastor John, thanks for hanging out once again. And as always, we appreciate you hanging out with us as well. And we will see you all next time.